Hello, welcome to the State of UX webinar. Elia, okay, actually I can do that as well. Let me share the Miro board that we'll be using today. Here's the Miro board that we'll be using today. Please feel free to join me, although I will be sharing my screen. We'll be starting in a few minutes, in about 2 minutes, just waiting for a few more people to join before we can start. All right, welcome. I think we can start now. My name is Angel. I am a UX lead at UX. I have been with UX for the past coming to 3 years, from the UX researcher to product manager to now the UX lead. And yeah, for the past few months, not few actually, for the past 9 months, we've been working on the state of user research in Africa. Our yearly report that we release every year. And yeah, so we wanted to have this webinar to really just discuss some of the insights with some of the UX practitioners. I think I will let Ayanda introduce herself before we continue.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ayanda Ndaba, and I'm a UX researcher based in South Africa. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the discussion today. Yeah, I think we can get into it.
Thank you. Jiri, you want to introduce yourself a bit as well?
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone, my name is Njiri Gadiga Njiri. I'm a UXer based in Kenya. I've been in US for quite a while, and I am the founder of UX Kitchen. Yeah, so UX Kitchen partners a lot with UX, and that's also part of the reason we're here today. Looking forward to communicating and networking with you all.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jiri and Ayanda. So as we get started for the next really 2-3 minutes, I want us to go through a few icebreakers. So the first one is really we want to know each other. So you get a sticky, like I hope everyone can see my screen. You get a sticky and you will write your name and you'll just drag it to where you think you fit best. I don't know, actually, I think I fit best product manager and UX researcher, and just put it right there. I think people have already started. Thank you very much. And then the next one, you really, no waiting. The next one is for the people that have read the reports. I think this is how we'll see who has read and who hasn't. You'll really just describe the report in one word, what really stood out to you, one word that stood out to you once you were reading the report. And then the next one is really just a check-in of how you're feeling today. So we know, should I use a lot of energy to speak or should I use less energy to speak? Just you will get a sticky as such as again and move it to where you feel the human being somewhere is. What is speaking to you? Is it the person jumping with a balloon, or is it the person reading a book, or is it a person celebrating something? Yeah, I think I will put maybe 2 minutes on the clock. Sorry about that. Anyone need a bit more time? I feel like people are still on describing the report in one word. Maybe 30 more seconds. Just 30. Cool. Thank you guys so much. I see we have a lot of UX researchers / or designers. Only one entrepreneur. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Hi, Jan. And for the reports, okay. Community effort, that is true. We really had a lot of support from various communities across Africa, and we're really appreciative of that. It was useful and fantastic. Okay, this is nice. I like that there's no negative words. Trend-setting, okay, really like that, and insightful. Okay, thank you so much. Pioneering, wow, those are nice big words. Yes, so how are we feeling today? Okay, I put this human being up here who is being carried on the shoulders of someone else, because I feel like, of course, the State of UX was a team effort, but also this webinar as well as a team effort. And yeah, I feel like we really come together to do something really good. So thank you for the whole team behind that. Okay, so moving on to the agenda, we are together for probably now 80 minutes, for the next 80 minutes. And yeah, so I wanted to give an introduction very quickly on the state of UX, and then moving on to some of the insights about career and training and ethics as well. And then we'll have just a discussion with Jiri and Ayanda. Please feel free to leave any comments or questions. We'll keep coming back to them and asking either Jiri, Ayanda, or even myself some questions I could answer, or even some of the UXs, sorry, we call ourselves UXs at UX, some of the UXs who were a part of this report. Yeah, and then of course, like we did last year as well, for those who were there last year, we'll just have an ideation, a few minutes of ideation to really see what we can do for next year's edition. Actually, last year when we had this ideation, a few minutes of ideation, people came up with, we really want to understand the careers of UX researchers. And from that's where we understood to go in depth about the careers of UX researchers and how they got into it. So it really helps us a lot for next year's edition to see what other people would like us to focus on. All right, any questions, comments before I move on? No? Feel free to also put it in the chat if you can't access, for some reason, the Miro board. We have a lot of people at UX who can help me look at the questions. Cool. All right, so I have 5 minutes to go through the intro. So just a quick intro about UX. We are one of the largest African design companies in Africa, with a team of 45 UXs, as we call ourselves, between Dakar, Nairobi, Abidjan. I myself am in Kigali. And yeah, we are also our founders are also the founders of Looker. And Looker is a market research service, a platform that we also use for the State of UX reports, where you can quickly get quantitative insights from any users. And we use Looker to get some of the quantitative data. I mean, all of the quantitative data that you will see today. And yeah, so moving on to why we decided on the study. So in 2022, we published, 2021, we published the first State of UX in Africa. And yeah, so last year we also published the 2022 report. And we really thought that it was a good idea to have this report or to do this study, because UX research and UX design, it is a booming industry in Africa, of course, still maturing, especially in some parts of Africa. But there's a lot of digitization of international development, of humanitarian programs, and they are targeting this fast-growing population. And we saw, of course, UX research is also continuing to grow, so we have to get data on it. Of course, Africa is a continent, that doesn't have a lot of data. And last year we focused a lot on the tools that UX researchers are using, on the methods they're using. And of course, that's a big part of what we did this year as well. But we also went into depth on how do companies conduct their research, how do researchers like us convince stakeholders, because that's one issue that, of course, we always see. And how are we growing in our careers? How are you UXRs or UXDs growing in their careers? We also spoke a bit about salaries, and of course, even today we'll speak a bit about that. yeah, so really thought it was very crucial to have this study and to have this report. And we want to really help the industry, we want to help researchers, we want to help designers, managers to really go out and speak to users. Because that's, I think that's, it's very rich to get data from the users themselves. Cool. I won't speak much about the methodology we used, but of course, as I said, we used Looker, our research platform for the 164 responses, and then went into depth with 22 interviews. If you have any comments, go ahead. I'm going to go over it because there are about 40 pages. So I'm not going to go through every single one. I'm just really a quick overview. And a lot of the people who participated were designers and researchers, of course. And across Africa, as you can see, we really had a big number of people across Africa, with most of our respondents from Nigeria. Any Nigerians in the house? No? Hopefully they are. Yes, so we also asked the size of the organization that they currently work in, and most of them work on big companies. And of course, the sector that's booming right now in Africa is fintech. So a lot of our respondents were also from the fintech industry. And yeah, so moving forward into how research is conducted in Africa, we asked if researchers have the companies have dedicated researchers in their organizations, and we see that a lot of them do not. And for those that do have dedicated researchers, there's only a team of 1 to 3 researchers. And you see, of course, this is an issue because we still need researchers in companies, especially in big companies. Teams tend to generally be smaller with 1 to 3 researchers, with 68.3% being only 1 to 3 researchers. And this is also very similar to what we had last year with, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 58% were saying that they are 1 to 3 researchers in the company. Yeah, so we also compared the organization size to the number of researchers. And you can quickly look through this. I'm really not going to go deep into the data. And we can see that research is not often conducted. They conduct it at least quarterly, which is very small compared to the data that we need from from users. Yeah. Any questions? Please feel free to stop me and ask any question you have. Oh, I see we have some Nigerians. Thank you. Going quickly into the methods and the tools and some of the challenges, we see that the bigger the organizations, the more researchers, of course, are available. And the more researchers are available, the more research is conducted. And depending, this was also a comparison we did, where depending how often is research conducted versus the number of researchers. And the more the researchers, the bigger the company, the more the researchers, and the more the research is conducted. In the methods that we saw that usability test, which is also my favorite, is one of the main ways that people conduct research, and diary studies is the least. I'm very interested to find out from Ayanda and Njiri which ones they also prefer and which ones they don't prefer and why. But yeah, so diary studies was also the least, and usability test was the most. Going quickly into the tools that organizations use, we have Google Forms taking the lead, same as last year, and Google Docs taking the lead. But for synthesis, we had Miro as well coming up, and Google Docs. As you can see, we're already on Miro, so we might be biased there. But yeah, so Miro and Google Forms take the lead with the tools for research and synthesis. And going into the perceived barriers for conducting research, which is one of the topics we'll be discussing as well with Njiri and Ayanda, is what are the common barriers when we face as UX researchers when conducting research. And the major issue, which is also the same as last. Okay, I will continue. Perfect. Going into career, salaries, and finding jobs. we saw that a lot of our respondents were mid-level. Of course, with a number, we don't have a lot of senior researchers on the continent, but most of them also work within the organization. And we see that a lot of the researchers want to start as either mid-level or junior and grow within that organization. And that also goes back to we need training. We need to train mid-level. There's a lot of training needed for mid-levels and entry-level researchers and designers. And also we asked about salaries. Going straight into the countries that have that pay their researchers and designers the most, we have Ghana, Kenya, and South Africa. And maybe Njiri or Ayanda will speak about this, since they're each in Kenya and South Africa respectively. But yeah, seeing anyone who wants to move, these are the countries to move to. Please do not move to Rwanda, they will know. Yes, so we also saw that researchers are paid slightly higher than designers in Africa, and most of us are remote, as we can see. Myself, I'm remote as well. But also, this is we understand that in the times that we are in COVID, with the pandemic, but also it's really nice to work remotely, in my opinion. So I think it's also a preference. So we also talked about how we also learned that researchers find their jobs through LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is the most popular one, but also referrals. There's also Indeed, another platform like LinkedIn, although very few people use it. And also internal recruitment, sorry. So yes, going straight into the training, we saw that a lot of researchers and designers are self-motivated, and they are either self-taught or have done online courses. And echoed in our interviews was a need for practical design research education. There are very few places or very few ways that a new user researcher looking for ways to find structure or to learn or to experience. There are very few resources on the continent. If you have any, please feel free to share in either the chat or the comment on the comment box on the Miro board, but also just speak up and tell us some of the resources to get trained as a researcher or designer. Our very own UX Academy, we have an academy at UX. We provide practical and engaging courses, drawing from experience, of course, from building products across the continent. And we saw a bit of a big graph, but we saw that a lot of people who gained training from actual schools comes from Senegal, with some of the design schools being based in Senegal, but also South Africa, and then Kenya. This is a bit of qualitative view of people's journey to user research. I won't go much about it, but you can go through the reports. You can also download the report yourself and go through it. But a lot of people were either self-taught or from academia to design. And yes, we also talked a bit about the user research education gap. And it's very hard to also grow within the company when you do not have, with some of the in-depth interviews that we had, it's very hard to grow within the company if you don't have either the mentorship or the resources to upskill some of the researchers or designers. But we saw that the communities have been trying to bridge this gap, this user research gap. And that's why we really want to talk about community today and how it has helped us to grow as researchers or as designers. There are various communities across Africa, UX Kitchen, as we had mentioned, where Njiri is a founder, Dear Designer in Nigeria, UX Salon in Egypt. So there are really a lot of communities doing a lot to help researchers and designers gain confidence and grow as a researcher. Yes, we also talked a bit about impact and how impact, of course, matters when we're talking about research. We want to see that our users are happier. We want to understand some of our customer behaviors, but of course, impact is a big issue. We want to see that some of the work we're doing, the insights that we're getting, they're impacting our users positively. Going into ethical considerations, ethics is a big topic. It's a very broad topic. It's a topic that we will be getting into. However, we, from the initial research, we also, I think, go deeper into it with the next report, because this time we really went with an overview. But we also want to speak about it with fellow researchers who are on the call or designers. But we want to understand how you guys define ethics. How do you, well, actually, please put it in the chat box or on the Miro board, how you define ethics in research. How we saw that, of course, researchers, designers, and stakeholders all define research ethics differently. For stakeholders, sometimes it can be making sure the integrity of the research is kept, so that data protection laws are kept. But for researchers, it's sometimes we perceive ethics as making sure the user feels as comfortable as possible to voice their opinions and their thoughts. Yes, so we really want to, and also, other than understanding what ethics looks like in research, we want to understand what research ethics looks like in the African context. So we're all on the African continent, I hope, if I'm not mistaken. But what does research ethics look like in the African context, and how can we speak more about it? How can we, some of the tips to be more ethical in our research? And yeah, so for the quant, we really asked how researchers obtain consent from each participant. And most of them said it is verbal consent. So once you get into an interview, you just ask them for their consent, ask them for consent to use some of their data and what you're using their data for. Of course, sometimes we also record, and making them understand that what we're using that recording for. So we also went a bit into design advocacy. So we understand that stakeholder buying is a very big problem for researchers, product managers, for getting that stakeholder to convince our stakeholder that this product is working, this feature is working, to instead of switching the whole product strategy or the whole business strategy. And speaking to researchers, and we also spoke to stakeholders, how they were convinced by their product managers or by the researchers about the research. And we came up with a bit of, I think, 2 or 3 ways. So getting research champions. By that, we mean finding people within the organization. So partnering with bigger and stronger teams, and also leveraging the use of newsletters and social media to document the impact that the research is having. Also having the ear of someone who is a key decision maker. Some of our researchers say this, investing time in research education for important stakeholders. One stakeholder who said that is that sometimes they do not understand or even see what you guys are doing, and I need you to educate me on what you're doing and how it's impacting people. So that's on getting research champions. And then there's also bringing stakeholders into the action. Involve your stakeholders in the research activities, bring them, involve them in one-on-one interviews, sometimes have them sit in as you're having a one-on-one interview, having them lead some of the research that you're doing. So basically let them get their hands dirty. Also being very creative in writing the reports. And the last one is picking numbers. I think this, we all know this one is really just finding ways that your qualitative insights and quantitative insights, they speak to the numbers that the stakeholders want to hear. They want to hear, okay, if you do this, you will increase your revenue by 70%. Impossible, but we can get there. In a low design maturity context, also contextualizing case studies from secondary resources and projecting the research return of investment. So data and number, they work. To make a case for the research, you must predict the impact of the research with the numbers, so they will get 70% increase in revenue if they add this feature, because this is what the user is saying they need. So concluding quickly, so we can get into the discussion with Njiri and Ayanda, is we've seen that there is still a lot to discuss. There's still a lot to discuss in terms of careers, in terms of ethics. But UX research continues to steadily grow in Africa. Any questions, comments before I start firing at G and Ayanda? No comments in the, no comments or questions in the chat?
There's a comment about the benefits of doing in-person research compared to remote research in the chat.
Okay. About user researchers working remotely, here is some research that indicates that may not be ideal. Each team member has to be exposed directly to the users themselves. Teams that have dedicated user research professionals who watch the users, then in turn report the results through documents or videos, don't deliver the same benefits. It's from direct exposure to users that we see the improvements in the design. Cool. Yeah, this is also a big topic, I guess, in UX is what is the future of UX research? Is it really sitting down with users for, let's say, 2 to 3 days to really understand them, to understand the way they're thinking? Yeah, so thank you for this. Okay. Any other comments? Cool.
There is one question from Octavio, just came. How do you balance the ethical considerations against the profit-driven needs of company needs, since we are dealing with people as the subject?
That's a good question. And let me maybe Jiri answer that, but before she answers that, Jiri, could you please tell us a bit about your journey into UX research? Why you decided to go into UX research, how you did it? And then maybe you can kick off with a question about the question that was just asked.
Yeah, sure. I apologize if my voice is husky. I've been battling a flu all week. So I hope you can hear me well. My journey, when I started doing UX, I didn't even know it had a name. I was just like curating experiences for our customers in a very small startup where there was one developer. I was a PM, nothing fancy, just like a 3-people team. Yeah. So it's like talking to customers a lot, finding out what they like and what they don't like. Then slowly I went into software development, did that for a while. And then I realized I like the other part better, where you're figuring out what to build rather than actually building it. So by then I'd realized what I'm doing is called product design and UX. So did a lot of research. So I would say I'm self-taught. So actually, I don't identify as a UX researcher, but I have done a lot of work in UX research. With startups in Africa, what happened, because I did work in startups for a while. If you're hired as a UX designer, first of all, you had to fight to get hired. Because usually they'd be like, oh no, our budget is for developers and engineers and all that. So when you're hired, you have to do the whole process. You have to be the UX researcher, you have to be the UX designer, right? And UX manager, UX lead, you're the whole thing, right? So, but what that helped me with is understanding UX from a very bird's view angle. And I'm still excited about UX research. I do it, but in solo projects, not really directly at work, but it's a topic I'm very excited about. Cool. So the question was,
sorry, before you actually get into that question, how do you define ethics in either your job or even in your personal project? How do you define ethics?
Cool. So it's not going to be a very laid out answer or intelligent answer, but for me, ethics is while you're creating experiences, whether it's service, whether it's product, you have to think about.
Please mute yourself. Sorry about that. I don't know.
Okay, I'm unable to mute them myself.
Okay, I think they're muted now. Cool. Thank you. So sorry about that.
No worries. Yeah, so for ethics is I think we always have to consider accessibility and inclusivity, privacy, and consent. I think if I was to define ethics, it would be those 4 things. So inclusivity, all these things will ensure that you're not leaving vulnerable groups, like possibilities for them to be treated unfairly. Consent is how you're managing, how are you taking care of people's data, and how are you communicating about that. And then inclusivity and accessibility, we are all differently abled. So if you're building, maybe that will answer the question. If you're building and you don't consider these things, you're already leaving out a part of the market. And then number 2 is, if you are a UX researcher or a UX designer and you can't build with accessibility standards in mind, then I think you are leaving a very big angle of your work unaddressed. Yeah. So I would say if you're, and I know it's been overlooked for years, because for example, in Africa, especially when it comes to UX, people think about like accessibility as the last thing, or like inclusivity as the last thing, but we can't afford to do that anymore. I think the world moved on a long time ago. So if you're gonna build a skill in the UX world, you need to also know how to do that for accessibility, inclusivity, privacy standards, read a bit on data and how to communicate some of these consent things. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Jiri. Moving on to you, Ayanda, can you also please tell us a bit about your journey within the UX research space, how you got into it, and also some of the challenges you faced as well?
Yeah, sure. So I guess my journey into UX research was really all about curiosity. I think I was curious to find out, and I think that's a very important skill in this industry. But yeah, I was fresh from university. I was about to graduate and received an email that was like, hey, we're hiring or looking to hire. It was a small advertising agency. We're looking for interns in the UX design space. And at that point, I'd done quite a number of years in university and education space, and I had no clue what UX design is. So I went on the internet, looked it up, and I was like, well, this looks interesting. The skills, or at least the requirements for this type of role, is something that I'm keen to learn on a little bit. No clue on what design was. And so for me, I think because I was doing quite a lot of research, I think I was more drawn to that part of UX design. And even at that time, I wasn't really aware of that. And so I did my internship and I kind of fell in love with the job, or the role, if you will. And I was more drawn to the UX research element of it. I think that especially in South Africa, and I'm not sure in the rest of the continent, a lot of people who study in the humanities space or in the social science space often leave without really knowing what to do next. And it was so interesting that there was such a synergy between the type of skills I was accumulating at university level with the type of work that is done in UX. So it was just interesting that there's this industry and nobody's really speaking about it to the people that can actually get this work done and who are trained for it. And so I've been very passionate ever since to kind of advocate for the anthropologists and the psychologists and the sociologists to enter into this space, which is typically seen as more techie and, more design centered. And so that's where I feel like UX research really spoke to me, that these particular set of skills are so important in developing products across the continent. And of course, I think what really solidified it was whenever you're doing conceptual, design, like something that doesn't exist yet, and how key and central having, people, particularly in the margins. And I think Jira spoke about this idea about accessibility being something that people think about last. And so I think what was interesting was realizing that a lot of companies are doing it the other way around. It's like, here's a product and we're kind of always refining it afterwards, versus, oh, we're thinking about this and I think it would be great, so let's include people in that process in the beginning, particularly communities that tend to be marginalized. So that's kind of my journey into UX. Started off as a designer, wasn't really great at wireframing, so I figured let's just go where my skills are. And yeah, that's how I entered UX research.
I hear you with the wireframes. I'm also not good at them, but we're learning. We continue to learn, and of course, we spoke about some of a few challenges. But are there any other challenges you faced growing in your career as a UX researcher?
Challenges. I think one of the things that became quite apparent was at the time I felt like there was not enough knowledge, right? So I had to kind of seek it out. And I think for me, what was very interesting, or what really helped, was the communities that exist online, really. I started working during the pandemic, and so for some odd reason, all of these conferences and meetups were blowing up everywhere. But prior to that, I found it very difficult to get into UX design in particular, or in UX in general, because again of the type of degree I hold, right? It was a very hard sell. It was a very hard sell to say, hey, I want to enter into the tech space or design space without any of that background, which is typically thought to be associated with that. Often it would be UX, UI, or software engineers, etc. So I think for me, it was kind of selling those skills. That's what was one of the hardest things to do, to say, hey, you actually need the voice of the user, and I have the skills to help you gather that. I also think that one of the big challenges is, I think in the beginning, separating that whole like UX, UI, and where your skills fit in there. That was one of the challenges I had, because I felt as though some companies, when they hired, weren't very specific about the roles. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but there seems to be like, there seems to be like a conflation of both those roles, even though they deliver similar but different things. So kind of finding my feet in that space where entering into UX was a bit of a challenge. But again, I think curiosity, asking the right questions, seeking community, attending all of those conferences. I was doing conferences at 3 a.m. in the morning because I was so like interested in getting into the industry, learning about what people in UX do, in UX research do. So I think that's really what helped overcome the majority of those challenges.
Okay. Thank you so much. So curiosity and being dedicated. So waking up at 3 a.m. to attain a conference.
Yeah, you hit up a conference taking place in Australia or Europe. So I did that.
Yeah, that's so cool. And inspiring, honestly, because I'm not waking up at 3 a.m. But a good leeway to my next question to G, who is the founder of UX Kitchen, is how has been your journey, not only as we've talked about your journey as a researcher, but I want to understand your journey for founding a community like UX Kitchen, and how it has also helped you in your journey as a UX researcher on the side, but also some of the challenges that you have faced.
Okay. So I went to a course for software entrepreneurship in a school called MEST in Ghana for about a year. While I was there, I really fell in love with UX, and like I read everything I could on UX, and I did projects, unpaid projects, just so I could like build a skill or something. And I did. But then I was like, when it was time to come back home, I was worried because I knew there's a lot of engineering communities, but I didn't know of any UX communities. But while in Ghana, I'd made friends with a pal of mine called Namso, who ran Figma Africa then, or Figma. Lagos, I'm not sure, yeah. But then coming back to Nairobi, I wasn't sure what to do, right? So when I came back to Nairobi, I really wanted people to talk to UX with, right? And so I just decided to build a community, and with Figma, I could have started, and I did. I started Figma Nairobi, but I felt like Figma was very focused on the UI side of things, like visual, right? And I'm more of a process kind of babe. So I started UX Kitchen, and initially I was like, okay, we are gonna be like 10 people meeting monthly, maximum 10. That's good. I'll just get some space at iHub or something. Yeah. And then slowly, like it built, people were coming. I wasn't ready. Like I had to learn how to public speak because it grew so quickly, so soon. And it was so exciting and so validating to see people are excited about this thing. So we started getting speakers. We started getting people to talk about their work, their projects. We got employers to come and hire people from the community. We were networking. It was so cool. It became like a thing people looked forward to on like the last Thursday of the month. Yeah. So, and we used to have like wine. We made it fun, right? Because UX is supposed to be fun, right? Yeah, we made it fun. So that was cool. So challenges, for me, it was mentorship in the beginning. From that story, you can just tell that when I came back, I was like, oh my God, I don't know anyone who's as excited for UX, research and design as I am. So finding someone to help me in the beginning was hard. But as soon as like, you know, they start hearing your name, they start seeing about the community, they actually pop up. They're like, hey, I'm in product management, but I've been studying this and that. So I think mentorship is also like, you need, you know, the way they say, if you want a date, you can't be at home and wait for like your suitor to you know. Yeah, I should learn that. I'm always in my house. But anyway, what that says is it's the same thing as mentorship in any career. If you want a mentor, you can't just sit and not talk about it. So you have to be like on Twitter talking about UX, random articles, sharing just random jokes about UX, LinkedIn saying you're looking for a mentor, something like that. So that's what I learned. I think I've answered both questions, right?
Yes, I was just wondering how it also helped you improve in you as yourself as a UX researcher, how the community helped you.
Oh, yeah, because the beauty about teaching, because I had to get into teaching now. When you're running a community, you have to find content. They can't come and just look at you, right? So I had to learn on the go. So I was always on YouTube. Anyway, so how that helped is that when you're teaching, you learn about your blind spots even better. You're like, because you can't teach something you don't understand, right? So that was really nice. And then the second thing was just talking to people, talking to someone. They come and say, hey, I'm learning about, like in this day and age, they would say, I don't know, large language models in UX. They would talk about, someone talks about service design. And at the time I was like, what is service design? You know, so someone will say something that wasn't in your radar. And then you'd be like, okay, I want to know more about that. Actually, can we have a session? Because design is design, regardless of which part it is in. Yeah. So did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you so much. And I guess the next question is to both Ayanda and Chiri. What are some of the, I feel like we have a lot of UX researchers that we've seen on the call, but what are some of the tips or tricks or advice you would give a researcher who is just starting out in their career? I guess you already started with mentorship. If you're looking for a mentor, you can't just sit at home and just look at your laptop. You have to be proactive. And also, Ayanda, you talked about it a bit, about you have to be dedicated. If it's waking up at 3 a.m. and attending a conference, you have to do it. But any other tips or advice that you can give junior researchers or entry-level researchers, or me myself, who is a mid-level researcher, in how to progress? Maybe, okay, Ayanda, you can.
I'll take this for beginners because I'm graduating into that mid-level now. I think if you're a beginner in this space, it's very, very important to network. So of course, like, you know, setting up in a community or joining a part of a community is one of the easy ways to do that. And so how I did it was that there's a community called She Can Do. They're based in South Africa, and they really sort of facilitated my transition into UX research. So I think find those resources, be very like intentional about it, go on LinkedIn, go on the internet, go on meetups, and really network you need to network, otherwise, and find like the type of work that you want to do, the type of or research and the type of companies you like to work for. So that's what I would advocate for like a beginner. For mid-level, okay, let me think about it.
No worries, as Julie is answering. Julie, also, as you're answering how to progress as a UX researcher, someone also asked any advice on how to start a community. And also that's something I'm also interested in, because in Kigali, we don't have that. We have design communities, maybe there are randoms on the call, but we don't have any research communities. And my boss is always pushing me to then start the community. If there's no community, then you do it. But how do you start it? So yeah, so you can answer that question as well later on.
Cool. So I guess we start with the tips. The tips, when I was starting off, I always give the same advice, which is read all you can. Like I used to be on Medium all the time. There's this guy who used to make fun of me because that's the only content I used to consume. Like when they come to my phone, that's what I'm on. But read all the content you can. And the thing is, design process, it's not like code. Code, there's a syntax and you have to follow the syntax, right? But the design process, it also involves a bit of like your psychological process. So what I did is I consumed so much information, and in the end I had to define a design process for myself. I was like, okay, if someone gives me a challenge, how would I go about solving this problem, all the way to interfaces, right? Or even front-end development, depends on how far you want to go. And I had to define that for myself from all the information I had gathered. Now, sources of information, of course, articles. Medium, I would recommend Medium. For YouTube, I would say AJ and Smart. They're still my favorites. And just, I think there's other ones, but you can always like look them up on YouTube. And then courses. There's an online school called Interaction Design. One second. Interaction. Just Foundation. Yes. Interaction Design Foundation. They have great courses. I have vetted their content, and it's really, really good. Like I would hire someone who have done courses on Interaction Design Foundation. Now, I would say don't spend all your time on courses. Instead, like work actual problems. So create a portfolio, right? I would say if I had like 100% of time, right, I would spend 20% on courses and 80% like doing actual project work. Now, if you don't know where to start, you don't have to be hired, you don't have to be an intern somewhere. Just create a problem, come up with a problem, write it down, write your process down. US is your thought process. It's not the imagery we see in the end. That's just like a nice part, right? But when people are hiring, they want to see, how do you solve this problem? Like from the start, what questions are you asking, right? How did you pick the people you're going to talk to? What are the questions you're asking them? Did you find out their needs, their frustrations? What are the competitors? What are their opinions on the competitors that already exist? What is a challenge that the competitors are not solving, and how will you solve it? Such things, those are the things that make a good UXer. So those were the tips. And then the other question was how to start a community. Guys, it's not rocket science. It's not.
Actually.
Just go to meetup.com. Start an account, they'll ask you a few questions. And, you don't have to don't overthink it. Just know what you want to do, answer the questions, create an account. You don't have to invite anyone or create an event, just see how it works, right? And then the next thing, just be like, okay, what are we going to do for the year? Assume it already exists. Then you create a calendar. And what are the things you want to talk about? What are the people you want to invite and attract, right? Then you're like, okay, if let's say we will have a webinar around UX research, what are the topics I want to be discussed, right? Like today, what's happening? You can even borrow from this strategy that they used, right? So you curate something, get people who are excited will come. So if there's no UX research community in Kigali, I don't even think there's one here. I don't know of any here. I don't know. I mean, are you on the call? But yeah, if there is, let me know. But it's really that easy. You will always find people who are just as excited. I thought we'd be 10 people. We are almost 2,000 people now in UX Kitchen. Yeah, it's mad crazy. I know.
That's
So,
crazy, yeah.
yeah. So it's not that hard. Yeah, you just need to be excited about something and find people who feel the same. Yeah.
Okay, going back a bit into the report, we saw that some of the challenges were stakeholder buy-in. I want to know from both of you if you have ever, first of all, experienced where a stakeholder, you can't convince them, they're not budging. What have you done? Any steps? Sorry, I'm trying to find it. Yes, so have any of these steps also worked for you, getting research champions, bringing stakeholders into action, speaking the numbers, or is there any other ways that you have convinced stakeholders to come into the action? Yes, maybe you can start with you, Ayanda.
I'm trying to think. I think I've been privileged enough.
It's privileged.
Yes, privileged enough to work for, I wouldn't really say mature, companies in that sense that really understand the value of UX research. I think, yeah, honestly, if I'm being really honest, I'm privileged in that sense. But I know that it's one of the things that a lot of UX researchers tend to struggle with, which is trying to convince stakeholders on the importance of research. I think one of the good ways to do that is really to get them involved in the process. I read somewhere on the comments about this idea that it's important. Buy-in can only happen when people understand why, when they understand the reason why. And so one of the really important things is to really, start considering how can we get your designers into the fold? How can we get your, software engineers into the fold? How can you get people who are probably not even, in product design or product management within the business in the fold? So basically making research a part and parcel of the culture in a company. And I think that's where the real challenge lies, is how do we do that? And I think once we tap into that, that's when it becomes less of a challenge to get stakeholders in. Although I must say that I work at a, quite a large company here in SA, and they already have systems in place. So it's also important, I guess, to be in a team or to be part of a team that is advocating for that innovation, to say, hey, this is why research helps. But yeah, I don't really have an answer to that because I've never really had to deal with it to that extent. But I think that's why it's important to really get everybody in the entire team to understand, like, this is why we do research, have them sit in the sessions, have them run their own sessions. It does really bring in a different perspective.
Thank you, and I'm not sure if my mic is on. But yeah, go ahead, Julie.
Yeah. So stakeholder buy-in, I would say two things, right? So again, in a big company, the good thing is you don't have to do the convincing. They probably already know, this is important. But still, sometimes you need to bring in the numbers. So for example, when Samsung changed their screens, right? Business really shot up for them, right? And it was mostly about the user experience, how the user is experiencing that TV in their room, right? They didn't want a big bulgy thing that just takes up a lot of space. They wanted something that almost looks like part of the art, right? And that really changed, it revolutionized. I can't say that word quickly, guys. Yeah,
Okay.
it did that. It did that for the industry, right? And they've been making big bucks since then. So if you can find something that's unrelated, that's easier to understand, even brick and mortar, and you can show someone, hey, they actually had to go and talk to users and find out that users don't like big, bulky things, right? So, and that's how they made money. So it was not an aesthetic decision, it was a business decision. So yeah, so numbers. The second thing is, I know there's a lot of us in startups in Africa, where now you have to do like the convincing. And I always said, sometimes, unfortunately, when you're in such a space where it's a small startup, they are fighting UX research, especially, you have to be the one, you almost have to be like a salesperson for UX. If you care for UX enough, you have to be like, we can't build for something we don't understand, for someone I've not met. I don't know their frustrations, I don't know their needs, I don't know their habits, I don't know at what point they will open my app, or if they can even use a phone that has an app. I don't know how much electricity they get. I don't know if this is a priority for them. You have to be the one asking the tough questions and put them in a way where it's less, it's more objective and less subjective. It's less about, oh my God, you guys are not seeing my work, but it's more about, if we don't do this, you're gonna have customer attrition, like you have to put it in such objective wording that they feel, okay, Sawa, you're not just trying to be seen, you're actually making sense for the product direction, right? And then we can fight about being seen later. You will be seen, like as your career grows, as Ayanda said, you eventually get into companies that you don't have to fight for the stakeholder buy-in, right? Yeah, I feel like there's something else I wanted to say, but I'm forgetting. Okay, it will come if it comes back.
It will come back. Okay, so I am done with my questions, but there is a lot of questions for you on the Miro board, each of you. And some of them are double for each of you, so you can both answer them. But one question I really like is, how do we avoid self-selection bias within UX research?
Sure, take that, Ayanda.
You can take it.
Oh,
yeah.
How do you
avoid self-selection bias?
Okay, so just to be clear, self-selection is like you choosing the people to interview yourself, or?
That's a good question. Can the person who wrote this question, you can unmute your mic if you can and speak up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the self-selection bias would come from working in an organization where you provided a client base and you're cherry picking the particular people that you want to study, but that might not necessarily be a representation of the population, or you're not sure. You're saying this is the sample that we're using. These are the people we think are likely going to fit that, but that might not be representative of what the outcomes are. So how do we remove that bias to say, no, these are not only the people, this might also encompass a larger group?
So I love to I don't currently actively do UX research in my role. I'm in design leadership right now, but I once taught a course for UX. And I remember there was let's call it a module where what you need to do before you even start UX research, right? So it's almost like UX research prep. And part of the work that we needed to do was decide how to pick people and then validate why we decided that. So if you leave assumptions out of the door, you're able to answer you're able to validate why you're picking the people you're picking, how many you need, and what kind of people you need from that sample set, so that you have a sample set that's extensive enough to give you all the data you need, but then also it's like focused enough for you to actually get valuable results. Beyond a certain point, you start getting the same answers. So for example, like if you have really picked a good set of people to ask, the 12 people, the results are the same, right? So how do you end up, if you want to be really good at it, is pick the right people, ask the right questions. But my answer to that would be pre-planning for the people and the questions. I don't know. Ayanda, do you have a better response?
Uh, well, I think it's a really important question in the sense that, in research operations, it's one of those things that you have to consider. What are the type of people I'm recruiting? What are the screening, I guess, how am I screening or vetting the type of users I have? I believe that if you really want good research, if you really want to help fix something, a feature, or design a great product, hear from people who hate it. And so it really doesn't help to, create a survey or, run a qualitative study if everybody is going to hype up what you're doing. So I think whenever I do research, I do that in the back of my mind, like find somebody who absolutely hates your product. And that will give you a good indication of what needs, work and where you can improve your product. And of course, that sample can be from people that vary from people that really hate your work to people that really find what you do useful. And that creates a balance in the types of, I guess, insights you get from your research. So that's how I would kind of deal with self-selection bias, because it doesn't help being affirmed by people that love your product if it doesn't really work for everyone. Yeah.
A follow-up question Sasha just asked is, how do you find people who hate your products? Where do you find them?
The internet. Go to Twitter.
Yeah.
I think also really this is why research is so important, because it's not necessarily about having one session or having a usability test session and you're testing a prototype. You have to understand how your users feel about your product from the beginning, like the whole life cycle of a product, right? And so one of the ways, obviously, as more people use your product, it becomes quite apparent. So social listening is one of the things that I find to be very important, although not all of it can be, I guess, not trusted per se, but I think that's a really good way to listen, but one of the ways to listen. So you can do it through social listening. And then for me, the next step is then to understand how many people feel like this. So survey that, right? Make it about numbers. And then have some people come in and really, tell you what they think. And that's the qualitative part, right? Because then you get a really rich understanding of where you can improve your product. So that's why I think the research is so important in the entire life cycle. You can't just say, okay, we've done this great app and that's it. No, how are people responding to that? What are they saying about it on socials? How can we make it better? Yeah.
Thank you. Moving on to the next question. There's a question for Ayanda. Do you deal with imposter syndrome? Did you deal with imposter syndrome? And how did you handle it if you did?
Yeah, sure. I feel like all of us, or a great majority of us, experience imposter syndrome. A recent example of that was I'm very confident in usability tests. It's one of my favorite things to do. And I remember feeling so anxious for, I don't know, whatever reason it was. I just felt super anxious, super just uncomfortable. And I think what really helps me get over imposter syndrome is to think about myself as somebody who's qualified for the job. And I know it's hard, but it really is what it is. If you've been doing something for a couple of years, it's very difficult to get it wrong. Something that especially that you're comfortable doing. That said, I think it's also one of the ways that our minds keep us on our toes. I think a little bit of imposter syndrome helps in the sense that you are constantly trying to find ways in which you can grow, in which you can be better. And so I don't fault imposter syndrome in that sense. But I think one of the things that, and I learned this from a mentor of mine who was like, hey, you're here. That means you're already like, you're okay, you know, you're here already. So that's one of the ways that I've kind of worked around imposter syndrome, is to think about myself as capable, because if I'm in that room, that means I'm capable. And I think it applies to everyone. Whenever that's, you know, that feeling comes up and you have a presentation, or you're just feeling a bit uncomfortable, or, you know, your self-esteem is a bit low, it's always like, think about the fact that you are in that room already, and that's already enough validation, I feel like.
Thank you. Yeah, I think everyone, if not most people, deal with imposter syndrome, so that's cool. For Njiri, there's a question here. I think I'll combine two questions with respect to time, but there's a question of how did you move from a generalized view of UX into specializing? And I feel like I want to attach it to how can one transition from CX to UX? I don't know if you can answer them together, but up to you.
Okay, just to touch on the imposter syndrome, it never leaves, especially if you're someone who values growth and new knowledge. And then at the speed that tech moves, guys, I was Googling the other day, a few months back, about GPT-3, and I found an article on GPT-4. I'm like, can I not breathe? You know, I didn't even catch up. Exactly, you know. So it's just, it will always be there because you can't know everything. But the point is actually welcome it some more, because it lets you know what areas you're not well versed on. So if I enter a room and people are talking about something and I don't feel confident, then I know what I need to read on the next time I'm having like learning hours on Friday, right? Cool. So how can one transition?
Yes, so they asked, how did you move from a generalized view of UX? So you said you did a lot when you were just into specializing. And then also there was a question on how can one transition from CX to UX?
Okay, so how did I move from a generalized view? Initially, I was doing both UX and UI. In my mind, UI is just like the visual part, and then UX is everything combined. So initially, I was doing all that. It was exciting to like be able to move from challenge to full product. But then, to be honest, it's interest. I think you need to listen to your intuition and look at what you enjoy doing. And if you really enjoy the research part, then go deep on that. But then the trick is, whichever you choose, be absolutely good at it, right? So if you choose UI, go and learn everything there is to learn about UI. So if someone asks a question, you know that response, right? And that's the whole point of specializing, because there's two ways to go around. You could be a generalist or you could be a specialist. Personally, I'm more of a specialist, but now in my role, I don't think so. But all through my career, I was mostly a specialist, right? And there's beauty in specialization is because people now get to know you for that one thing. It makes you very hireable and it makes you very confident. Because like in my previous job, I was the UX lead, but I was also like the main UXer, right? So I was doing a lot of the actual product work, and we built a lot of products. And I built so much for so long. By the time I was done, no one could tell me I'm not a good UXer. You know, I just knew I'm a good UXer. And it's because of the work I had put in so much, you know, day in, day out. I'm just like working problems out and showing wireframes and all that, right? So, and that's because I'd chosen that and I'd focused on that. So intuition, excitement, what fuels you, and then once you know, put all your effort into it and make yourself marketable. Yeah. And then how can you transition from CX? I'm guessing, is that like customer experience?
Customer experience, yes.
Okay, so is this like customer support team?
That's a good question. I think the person who asked, if they're still here,
Yeah.
they could.
I would like more information.
Yeah. In respect to time, we have 40 minutes left, and we really would love everyone's feedback. Yes, on the report, but also we really want to see what in the future studies. This year's study, which will not start very soon, hopefully mid-year, just to understand what do you want to see in the next future studies. There is a board right here. I don't know if everyone is on the board. Please just feel free to put any sticky. You can say what you want us to see. You want us to research the salary of a specific UXR, we will do it. Anything really. We really want to see how big we can go with this report, because it is a big topic. And of course, you can't, it's a big continent as well. Africa is a big continent. So anything really, because last year it really helped us shape this year's report. So yeah, please take a few minutes. I think I'll put maybe 10 minutes on the timer for us to go through this. Maybe 7 minutes, so I can 10 minutes.
In the meantime, I'll put stickies to questions that were on my side as responses to those who I didn't get to answer.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who added some of the resources in the chat. There's a lot of resources that were shared. Jiri also shared some, but also some free courses with Udemy. So a lot of that, thank you very much. So for anyone who is looking for that, please look through the chat. These are some really nice ideas, research in remote areas in Africa. That's a question that keeps coming up. I think, Sasha, you shared an article that one UXI wrote about research in the agri-tech space. So I think maybe, Sasha, if you can comment the link as well. Okay. Thank you. Researchers fatigue, how to take care of oneself. Yep, that's one thing that we also spoke about as UXIS is the research guilt. How do we overcome it? What is it? Do people feel it? So something we might look forward to in the next one. Thank you all so much for your ideas and for being here today. We did not expect this many people, so I'm pleasantly surprised. So thank you so much for joining us today. Any other comments or feedback you have for us, please feel free to also LinkedIn us, reach out to us. Hello, Ayuk, the design. If I'm getting the email correct.
hello@ux.design.
Thank you, Elia. Yes. Maybe a last question, Jiri and Ayanda, is there any part of the report that also spoke to you a bit more from everything else we discussed, apart from everything else we discussed, anything that from the report that spoke to you? Ayanda, you can go first, maybe.
Yeah, sure. I think for me, it's the research ethics bit. I think, this is part of the reason why I love research so much, is that it helps us identify where more work can be done. And so I think just from kind of what the report was talking about, the fact that so many of us see ethics in different ways, if you will. And I think there's really more that can be explored there. And I really can't wait to read more on that, or at least be in that discussion for the future as well. Because I think there's a lot that needs to be, I guess, discussed and developed in that space, particularly on the continent. So yeah.
Thank you, Ayanda. And Jiri, anything that spoke to you apart from what we have discussed today?
Oh, I'm really bad at multitasking. I was
I'm
typing.
sorry about that. No worries. Go ahead.
What is it? Was the question this?
Question, anything apart from what we discussed today that has from the report that spoke to you, that you were a bit more interested in than the rest?
I think it was the salaries actually. Yeah, I didn't know. I mean, maybe it's expected, but I didn't know that. First of all, it was it that UX researchers earn more than UX designers?
Yeah, I was also very shocked by that number, by that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then also like the countries that pay well are, but I guess that's expected. Yeah. So I know. I think that's what spoke to me. I don't have any more to add to that.
Yeah, all right, no worries. Thank you guys so much. We have a bit 6 minutes left, but I just wanted to go through some of these ideas. By research ethics, as I understand, it's really a big topic, and that's one thing we decided for the next report we want to go a bit deeper into. It's a broad topic, and it's not spoken about a lot in the African context. And yeah, so there's also a very good introducing UX research to high schoolers as a career path. I think Ayanda, we spoke about it a while ago, is that in school they don't teach you, well, for me who did computer science, they only teach me HCD, that's it. I don't know, I never learned UX research, I just learned HCD. And even that, I didn't speak to any users, I didn't do any research, I just did a lot of design work, a lot of, Figma work. But what do you think about introducing UXR to high schoolers or even in university? It doesn't have to be, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm big like advocate of that. I think that again, what UX research does, or UX in general, is that it humanizes tech. And so I think it's really important at that level. But again, we are in a world where things are rapidly changing. Now there's, AI bots that can design UI and do UX processes and all of that stuff. So I think it's really important to, I guess, democratize, if you will, UX research or UX at that level, high school and university. It really broadens the accessibility of this space as well, if we can have people at a young age being aware of this field. I think it's better now. I'm yet to still find out if I went to first year and asked people around there if they know what UX is. I still have to explain to a lot of people what UX is still. Yes, so I think that for me would be when we've gone to a point, particularly in courses or degrees where there's a huge amount of graduates, but not enough graduates getting jobs. This is particularly the case in South Africa, where we're seeing high youth unemployment and having people with degrees sitting at home. And I think if we can have those conversations at that level, it would really open up UX to more people.
I was going to ask, are there any university students on the call to tell us if it has changed a bit, if they are talking about UX research? I think I saw some university students. I'm not sure. But yeah, that would be very cool, because in year one, I did not know what UX research was. Hi, Angels. There's someone I think who is typing, but anyway, thank you all so much. We have about 2 minutes left. Any last words, Njiri, Ayanda? Njiri, you can go fast.
Yeah. Last words would be, life has moved online. It kind of already was, but the pandemic made it even like we went deeper, which means that there'll always be a market and need for UX, right? As long as it's tech, there will always be need for UX, and tech is not dying, right? Now, besides even tech, there's like service design is design. So there's service design, there's industrial design. There's so much that will always require UX. When I say UX, I mean I'm inclusive of UX research. So understanding the user and having this as transferable skills, like such hard, good skills, means you can work anywhere. If you can figure out how to speak, how to select a user you want to talk to, how to speak to them to get enough value for you to validate a problem, do away with assumptions, and provide a way forward for the team. And then you being able to present that in a product design and strategy kind of way. Those are hard skills that you can sell anywhere. So I would say define your UX process, learn all you can, and then be confident and talk to the right people who can always like help your career up. Yeah, I think that's it.
All right, thank you so much, Jiri. Ayanda?
Quick one. Stay curious, stay asking questions. And that's how you make it in this industry. So those are the only things for me. Just stay curious, stay asking questions, network, find mentorship. And yeah.
Thank you so
Create,
much.
oh, here's another one. Create systems and processes. That's another one.
Thank you so much. And yeah, this has really been not only informative, but inspiring also for me as well, who is trying to start a community, thinking about it anyway, not trying, but still thinking about it. So thank you very, very much for agreeing to be a part of this. Thank you to everyone who has made it. We're right on time. Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, we'll look forward to the next State of UX reports. Have a great evening, afternoon for some. And yeah, bye.
Bye.
Bye.